Hello, my name is Chris and I'm a Group Commander within Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service. My main area of work and responsibility is for the service's community engagement and specialist risk management services. I'm here wearing a uniform of a senior officer, and if I sit here in silence, my rank markings might tell you who I am. I look formal, I'm wearing a tie, I'm wearing a service badge. It might communicate to you that I'm a person with power and authority. Watlerwick et al. 1967 says that leaders cannot not communicate, and this is a statement I agree with. It's been particularly relevant to the situation I've been dealing with over the last month. In mid-October, Hertfordshire Fire and Rescue Service was issued with an accelerated cause of concern by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, HMI, and that indicated systemic issues with the service's approach to preventing fires and that there may be a safety risk to the public. This is a very big deal for the service, as it suggests to the public and its staff that it's morally and ethically failing in its corporate social responsibility to keep the public safe. So I've been leading the development of the action plan in reply to the letter of cause of concern, and as a senior leader I've been using this as an opportunity to observe the executive leadership's communication response and what the organisation's response is, so that they'll be able to support my own development and improve the work that we do. So I've analysed the service and I believe that it can be split into two parts, and they can be as different as night and day. There is the operational part, and that responds to the emergencies, and the everyday business part, the type that you would find in any contemporary business. And this diagram is adapted from the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. The information source transmits via a sender to be decoded at its destination by its receiver. And this is a very fire service approach to communication. There is expectation that a quality input from the leader will result in a unified understanding and output from the followers. If a leader is a good communicator, the quality of the message will be understood, with the receiver being a passive participant. This is very fire service because from the perspective of the operational side, which is the largest part of the organisation, this does appear to be successful. We do save lives. At a fire, the commander issues instructions and the followers respond. Communications at an operational emergency is a command and control model as described by Mather and Bowen 2008. Information moves from the top down in a tell and respond style as we seek to bring control and order to the very real VUCA environment of a life-threatening emergency. And what we do with this operational success is we translate it as being the most effective approach, and then we apply it by all levels of management and to all situations, like the receipt of the HMI letter. When the service first received the letter, a single staff email went out, and it was sent from the executive within the first 7 days. And since then, it's been about 45 days since, there's been no other email sent or an attempt by the executive to communicate outside of that command and control model. Then, through not communicating, the executive is communicating to its staff. It has made the assumption that a single message has been transmitted and it will be decoded and understood. And the assumption then is that's enough. And what I want to do is understand, how did we get here? I recognise that my leadership development is broadly the same as that of my colleagues. We're all 20-year plus serving leaders within the same organisation. Shane 2009 argues that culture is the pattern of shared tacit assumptions learned by a group. My evaluation is that we assume that as good leaders we are able to communicate in a linear process from the top down. That's what we're taught, that's what we do. The issue, however, is that Rubin and Gigliotti 2016 says that within that linear communication model, a failure of communication can be viewed as a failure of leadership itself. And this is a perfectly logical hypothesis to the decades of orthodox leadership development. And the focus of our operational response is the primary measure of success, and oftentimes it's the only measure of success. This is a cultural issue, and I needed to gain a greater level of understanding to be able to tackle and develop this action plan. So I analysed our culture using the Shane 2009 Corporate Survival Guide by looking at the 3 levels of culture of espoused values, the artefacts and the underlying assumptions. And I've determined that we have an order profile of culture, which is focused on respect, structure and shared norms. Leaders emphasise shared procedures and customs, and its overemphasis on rules and traditions reduces the individualism and limits the organisational agility. People play by the rules and want to fit in, and our communication strategy, our leadership development, the way we interact with each other supports and reaffirms the order culture, and the order culture reaffirms communication strategy, our leadership development and our interactions. We seek to rationalise and bring control to something that is predictably unpredictable. And this presents a barrier to staff engaging with meaning. Research by Mather and Bowen 2008 indicates that command top-down communication profile is outperformed by all other profiles, and that without exception, an open profile where information moves up, down and across in an inclusive way outperforms all others. And I've been working to build a department and team that is open, inclusive and high performing. And that requires that we move away from that traditional procedure and custom, especially if we want the action plan to be a success. I started this action plan by looking to be enabling of transparent communication and giving people the opportunity of speech and feelings. Mather and Bowman again suggests that know plus feel equals do, and this is what I wanted to try. So I began by setting up 5 interdepartmental workshops from the day and night sides of the business, with the only agenda item being HMI CFRS letter. I facilitated the conversations of each workshop having around 12 to 15 people each, and I wanted to try this method as Stacey 2012 argues that group meetings with a mechanistic agenda may sideline or cover over complex and uncertain issues, but those with a very loose agenda may be conducive to reflexive inquiry, and that's certainly what we needed to develop the plan. So for this to be a success, it was important for me to be able to build and emphasise psychological safety for the teams involved. The CRPD says that when people believe that a team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking, they can speak up and take action without being embarrassed, rejected or punished, with research suggesting that this may have a moderate to large positive impact on team performance. I personally prefer this approach, as Stacey 2012 argues that participation and inclusion in a group persuades people to motivation, which is often contrary to the power of authority and coercive motivation, which is often used within the service, the power of my rank. I set the house rules for each workshop, which were all conducted over a period of 2 weeks. And these were simply that we listen, respect differences in opinion, it's okay not to know, and whatever is said in the room will not be attributable to any one person. I did share my very real, raw feelings and frustrations about the HMI letter to demonstrate that emotion, well-being and vulnerability are okay and safe in this space. I asked that each of my 5 direct team reports to attend the workshops and that each one be accountable for their own documenting of meaning by listening to the conversations as they develop and progress. After each workshop, we as a collection of risk prevention teams of the 5+I then collectively interpreted each of our individual meanings, with one person then accountable for facilitating and collating all of these into one overall shared meaning. So that by the end of the 5 workshops, I had 25 individual interpretations of the conversations and 5 collective group meanings. And within that was a richness of information and meaning. This process did enable me and my team to understand those organisational issues that needed to be addressed with the action plan. And it created the opportunity for organisational communication about the HMI letter through us setting the agenda, managing the meaning and creating sense making. This approach was an interactional model of communication, of inclusivity and interactivity, similar to the Schramm 1954 model. I feel it may have even started to develop towards a systems model approach described by Rubin and Stewart 2016, by not only being about communication, but starting to communicate our reality to reshape and create it. And it's here where the interesting dynamic between the night and the day, the mechanistic and the organic occur. My traditional view of the service was much that it was like a fire appliance, a mechanistic thing that can be deployed to perform a function of leadership to achieve that positive resolution, like our fire. Although it's become clear to me that it's not always inclusive and it does not always hear. And this is to be expected. Rogers 2021 posits that from a traditional viewpoint, managers do view an organisation as a thing to seek order and maintain control. Moles and Norman 2022 argues that managerialism within the public sector is a quasi-scientific discipline aiming to rationalise through a science-based approach. Herf 2017 further argues that managers attempt to rationalise using a scientific approach, break the world into smaller parts, but actually distance those parts from the whole. And what they appear to be arguing is that traditional management and leadership discourse is based on a linear scientific method of cause and effect, input and output. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. And in an attempt to bring about control, for breaking the problem into smaller parts, we actually distance ourselves. And I see this happen with the executives' email to the staff members about the HMI letter. So I've taken a rather different view I've now developed, and it's aligned to a Stacey 2012 theory of complex responsive processes, which reaffirms the argument of dominant management discourse being based on certainty and linear relationships. A complex responsive system like that of a murmuration of starlings is predictably unpredictable, with the organisation consisting of a large group of agents interacting with others according to its own principles. The service, like this murmuration, is a social entity made up of hundreds of individuals. No one individual group is able to direct or control the behaviour of the system, the butterfly effect causing small actions to potentially have big outcomes. I have no way of knowing what the impact of the HMI letter might have, or the communication gesture from the executive or my workshops. But I hope that a small action is going to have a big outcome. I think it's fair to say that overall the executive's response to communication about this letter has been inadequate. But then what would be adequate? Stacey 2012 says that when a CEO communicates with their staff, the meaning does not lie simply in the communication, but in the response to it. Meaning emerges from the response to a gesture. If work has meaning, people take it seriously. Like when a dog snarls at another, how does it respond? A counter snarl, a fight or flight? The HMI have explicitly stated that prevention of fires is not a priority. And observing the gesture from the executive and the response by the staff, I can see that the organisation has responded by feeling disappointed and directionless. I've analysed the individual and group workshop meanings, and I've also asked AI to summarise and analyse these meanings as well. So I started with a mechanistic communication and cultural approach that is usual to what we normally do to that HMI letter. Then engage with staff in an interactive and inclusive way to develop that shared meaning. I engage my team to perform and have accountability so we reflect together and determine what that means for us. We then took those themes and looked to develop that action plan. Then, as part of the process, asked a machine, artificial intelligence, to ask what does it mean for the organisation and its people. I've carried this thing full circle. And it's hugely insightful that the items highlighted by people during the workshops are mainly about process and communication. People have not seen, read or understood the strategic documents, and they don't know how to deliver good. But there's a clear and apparent lack of feeling. So when I asked the AI summary about staff, it said that people feel confused, uncertain, disengaged, isolated and undervalued. And although the workshops I think are a success and they had enabled a different cultural approach, they had engaged my team and they were inclusive, there are still decades of shared learning and culture to change. I've looked to develop the action plan differently to what might have been my usual approach of command and control, with two broad arguments having shaped my thinking and application, which I've used as a basis of my observation and reflection. On one side, there are a number of frameworks or steps that can be used to bring structure and control in an attempt to rationalise the complex. Frameworks that give names to cultures, the 5 steps of the action equation, of Mather and Boehm 2008, or the 8 principles of being a communicative leader, Johansson, Miller and Hamren 2014. I've used elements of each of these throughout the process, and I've used many managerial tools over the years, and so have my colleagues, and yet, as a service, this is where we are. Whilst another set of arguments posit that people and organisations are unpredictable, whilst leaders seek to bring control through the use of quasi-scientific linear tools, which may bring some competence, and failure being interpreted through the implementation of the tool rather than the tool itself being wrong. And I personally find the arguments by Ralph Stacey and Chris Moles especially compelling as a new way of looking at the nature of communication, organisations, people and culture, and I'm fully embracing this as a new approach. I commit myself to that change. So my approach to communication through the workshops has been to humanise it and look for meaning. This has been very successful in building the action plan, but also changing the way that we do things. I place the person at the very centre of my work, with Peretz, Russian and Painter 2019's explanation of the African philosophy of Ubuntu. I am because we are, and we are because I am, and that speaks very loudly to me. Those 5 workshops are the start of reshaping our meaning in the organisation. It's the start of reshaping my meaning within the organisation. Desmond Tutu said, I am human, therefore I belong, I participate, I share. And this is now the way I approach my leadership, communication and teams. Thank you.